It's another episode of the almost world-famous Cactus Atlas. On today's episode, we're in Tombstone, Arizona, here to visit the very famous Boothill Cemetery, which is actually located right over there, beyond that fence. If you're interested in seeing what it's like, join us on this adventure, and let's go check it out. So right behind this fence is this very famous cemetery. You can actually see some of the headstones right beyond. Just so you know, currently as of filming this, the fee is $3 for each person. So very reasonable fee to come see a piece of history. And right as you enter, you are greeted by many graves. So when you pay your initial fee, you will be given a very informational pamphlet that tells you about the graves here, or some of the graves anyway. Boothill Cemetery started accepting patrons, I guess you could say, in 1878. The cemetery is configured in rows. So over here, this is row 11, I believe, here in front of me, or the one behind. So row 1 is actually over on that side down there. Boothill Cemetery, not the original name of the cemetery, but it did get its name because back in the lawless times of the Old West, men died so quickly with their boots on, hence where the name Boothill Cemetery came from. Over the years, the cemetery did fall into neglect, and nature, the surrounding desert, did come back and claim much of the cemetery. But over the years, many folks interested in history have restored the cemetery to what you see today. Now when you enter the cemetery, you'll notice that a lot of the headstones just simply say unknown, just because time and neglect made it that way. So we looked up some information from the Tombstone Chamber of Commerce. Are all these headstones, these wooden headstones, original headstones? And turns out that they are not, because the cemetery was in such neglect that over time they just naturally were not readable anymore and deteriorated to a bad state. Sounds like a lot of them were replaced in the year 1950, and a gentleman originally made steel versions of these headstones, but steel and the Arizona monsoons and lightning didn't mix. So apparently there were one too many lightning strikes that tore this place up. So another interesting thing is a lot of these graves are not the exact spots that the folks are buried, because they had to kind of recreate a lot of this, although they do believe that they may be just a couple feet off.
You only move the headstone!
This guy was shot by Johnny Ringo over a dispute over a woman, I believe. Here's another interesting one where you'll see a lot of people, a lot of men died here by being shot or hung. And this is one of those, Johnny Wilson, shot by King. And Guadalupe Robles, according to the pamphlet, another man shot for harboring robbers, one of them being his brother. Man, we're starting to see a pattern here. Another person shot dead, Jack King. And here's another one, shot, 1878. This guy was shot. He apparently was involved in a train robbery and then shot by Jeff Milton. Apparently, after he was shot, he was brought back to Tombstone and lived long enough to tattletale on his friends. Right off the bat, you know, kind of walking around and reading the pamphlet, it's like you go grave to grave. It's like shot dead, shot dead, shot dead, murdered. It just doesn't stop. And that's another thing about here at Boothill, is that this cemetery was reserved for more of your outlaw types. So makes sense, I guess, why so many were shot dead. So one thing that I would like to know personally is, why were people such jerks back in the day? Why was that cool? Think of our times. You know, we all die of heart attacks now, We die fat in our beds. These men died with their boots on. And as with the Old West as things go, there's a little bit of fictional narrative melded in with this cemetery. We're gonna look at a couple graves that they believe over time were fictionalized by various owners to favor tourism and to make it a little bit of fun. So there are a few graves that we just read are actually fake or not accurate. This would be one of them, John Heath. There was something known as the Bisbee Massacre that he apparently was the ringleader of. We did read, however, that he was actually moved to Texas and is not actually buried here. So it makes you wonder, is there somebody buried here that's unknown, now marked as John Heath, or is this just totally a dud? And one of my favorite epitaphs of all time, you'll actually see it in theme parks, in other places. Here lies Lester Moore, 4 slugs from a 44, no less, no more. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. Apparently, this is also a fake, created probably by some owner of this to make it more fun, interesting, sell more admissions into the cemetery. Yep, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to believe in that, apparently it's not true. This is another pretty well-known epitaph here. We did read, however, that this is another one of the ones that is a fabrication and believed to be a fake. So I'm no historian, although the more I go out to visit locations like this here, I find sometimes there's definitely a very blurry line between legend and fact. You know, seeing all of these graves, knowing that there's a lot of recreation here out of necessity, how much is truly fact? So I did ask a couple questions. There's a gentleman here that's kind of I guess a caretaker, the one that we paid our entrance fee to, and I was curious to find out where are the records, and apparently there are records in the archives at the Tombstone courthouse, so that's where they found out a lot of this information, I think, on the headstones. I also inquired about a couple ones that I thought might be fabrications, like Lester Moore. The gentleman here says that Lester Moore was a real person, and there's information at the courthouse, maybe in the archives. So once again, I've read that a couple of these are fabrications, some aren't, but if I get time and that information is available, I will have to look that up. Now, there are some pretty well-known folks buried here for those who are interested in the history of the Old West. A couple names that you may already be familiar with would be 2 of the McLaury brothers, as well as a Clanton, that were shot down in the famous shootout at the OK Corral. So what you have here are some of the most famous residents of Boot Hill: Billy Clanton, Frank McLaury, and Tom McLaury. Note that they all died on the same date, October 26th of 1881. These were the men shot down by the Earps and Doc Holliday in the famous shootout at the OK Corral. You can see too, very easy to find this, just a giant pile of rocks. This might be one of the biggest draws here to this particular cemetery. And another interesting one, looks like Old Man Clanton over here, killed August 1881. And another one that I was specifically seeking out, Marshal Fred White, who was gunned down by Curly Bill Brocious, died in 1880. And you may know that name if you've seen movies like the famous movie Tombstone from the 1990s. He was actually shot in that movie by Curly Bill. If you're ever wondering where Curly Bill Brocious killed Marshal Fred White, I'm standing here in front of the Birdcage Theater, and this is the spot. These are interesting ones. The Bisbee Massacre, these men participated in it and were legally hung. This whole group of them right here. And these two gentlemen also, totaling 5, all part of that Bisbee massacre, hung in 1884. If you ever venture into the town of Tombstone, which is right down the road, Tombstone Courthouse, that's where these men were reportedly hung. No wonder folks think this place might be haunted. Such a grisly place in a way. You got a suicide, you've got a murder, killed by Apaches, killed. Now, if you're a fan of the paranormal, this place is supposed to be haunted. There are different legends and things here if you're into that thing. So, outside of the very interesting history here, that may be another thing that attracts you to come visit Boothill sometime. If you've seen some of my other videos, I want to be clear, I'm not a paranormal investigator. In fact, I honestly don't really believe in that stuff. This place though, you would think if there's going to be something, this could be the place. With all of these gentlemen and ladies here buried, many of you were probably very wronged. If anybody wants to say anything or do anything, don't be afraid of the sunlight. Come on out and let me know anything you want to tell me. Does anyone here have anything to say or to express? You've got a willing ear here to listen to you. All right, and I want to give you a few final thoughts about Boothill Cemetery. Final thoughts. That doesn't sound very good in a place like this. Anyway, yeah, Boothill's awesome. I would say it is the Mac Daddy of all Old West cemeteries. If you're into the Old West, if you're into Arizona, this is a must-do. If you're in Southeast Arizona, for sure. At only $3 to get in here, come on. It's worth it. My favorite aspect of this is that it really does give you a glimpse into the lawlessness of the Old West when you see all of these men and women shot or murdered, dying of disease. It really paints a grim picture, but it does really paint a picture of the Old West, and the proof is here. So, Boothill Cemetery, come check it out sometime. Highly recommended. If you're new here, please subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Also, you can hit that notification bell to stay on top of whenever we release new videos, which we're doing all of the time. Also, you can find us on social media at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the name Cactus Atlas. Well, we gotta hit the road. Hope you enjoyed this one, and we will see you on a new adventure right around the corner. So stay tuned and take it easy. It's old Wieners Anton.